Good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I want to talk about being a government slave, how to become a government slave, how to avoid becoming a government slave, and the real lesson of the story of Joseph. How do those things come together? Well, it's Sunday, so I won't have a commercial on it, but what better day to talk about this kind of thing? So join me on the deck. Grab yourself a cup of whatever, and I will start talking about the real story of Joseph. Let me have a sip first. What my whistle. Now, when you're talking about, and many of you have heard me talk about this story and explain this story. If you've been with us on the church channel, Stone Rock Church, you've probably heard me talking about this, and I think that I made one quite a while back on this channel, on the Integrative Preparedness channel. But we have a lot of new people joining us, so I want to talk about this again today because it is probably, when it comes to preparedness, certainly one of the most important lessons that we get from the Bible. Now, when people talk about biblical preparedness lessons, two people immediately come to mind, Noah and Joseph. Most people understand the story of Noah fairly well. Very few people really understand the real meaning of the story of Joseph. And of course, when I talk about biblical preparedness, I always throw in Jesus, not meaning that he should just be thrown in. He is the main, and I talk about his admonition to his disciples and the night he was arrested, when he told them, if you have, he who has a purse, take it, and also your scrip, and he who does not have a sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. Okay, a lot of people misunderstand that as well. But I want to talk about the story of Joseph. Now, many people have heard the basic story of Joseph, but most people haven't heard how it really carries out. Now, if you're even if you're not a believer, even if you're not a Christian, and I think most people on this channel are, this is going to mean something to you. Now, it's Old Testament, so it's not Christian teaching, but it is biblical teaching, and many of the Old Testament teachings, although not all of them, carry forward into Christianity. So the basic story of Joseph that most people know is, they know about his coat of many colors, right? His father, he was his father's favorite. He was kind of arrogant and a braggart, and always tried to lord it over his brothers, and they didn't like that. So they sold him to slavers and took him to Egypt. And when he got down to Egypt, he was sold as a slave. He was sold to a guy named Potiphar, chief of the guard. And Potiphar's wife took a liking to him because apparently he was a good-looking young guy. And he resisted her advances, but one day she falsely accused him of accosting her, and so Potiphar threw him in prison. Well, to make a long story short, he got out of prison. He was called out of prison because he was able to tell a couple of the other prisoners what their dreams meant. The word eventually got, long drawn out story, not important to this lesson today. The word eventually got out to Pharaoh, who also had a couple of bad dreams. And so he heard about Joseph. He says, come out and interpret these dreams for me. So that's where we're going to pick up the story, okay? If you want all that, it's in the book of Genesis. And, start about chapter 39 or 38. We're going to join this here in chapter 41 of Genesis, and verse 25, if you'd like to follow along with me. I'm reading out of the New Living Translation, not to be confused with the Living Bible. I like this one because it's easier for most people to understand than the King James, and we live in the 21st century, right? Not in 17th century England, and so a lot of people are misled, to be honest, when they read out of the King James. I know that there's a lot of people out there, King James only and all that. My purpose in this one is not to dispute that, but read the Word of God in a way you can understand, okay? All right, so we're joining Joseph here. He's talking to Pharaoh. Okay. He says both dreams mean the same thing. God was telling you what he is about to do. The 7 fat cows and the 7 plump heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. Refer yourself back to the dreams if you'd like. The 7 thin, ugly cows and the 7 withered heads of grain represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has shown you what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten and wiped out. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so terrible that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having the dream twice, it means that the matter has been decreed by God and that he will make these events happen soon. And he goes on, he says, my suggestion is that you find the wisest man in Egypt and put him in charge of a nationwide program. Okay, now we're getting into the nationwide government program. Okay, listen up. Let Pharaoh appoint officials over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years, 20%, right? Have them gather all the food and grain of these good years into the royal storehouses and stored away so that there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come. Otherwise, disaster will surely strike the land and all the people will die. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his advisors as they discussed who should be appointed for the job. Pharaoh said, who could do it better than Joseph? For he is a man who is obviously filled with the Spirit of God. Turning to Joseph, Pharaoh said, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, you are the wisest man in the land. Important question there. See, Joseph wasn't wise. It was God speaking through him. So we know that all wisdom comes from God. Pray for you want wisdom, read Proverbs. And wisdom begins with the fear of God, meaning the respect and the fear. Fear, it can be that fear only what one who can destroy your soul, but ultimate respect, love, worship, all included in that biblical use of the word fear. Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, you are the wisest man in the land. I hereby appoint you to direct this project. You will manage my household and organize all my people. Only I will have a rank higher than yours. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh placed his own signet ring on Joseph's finger as a symbol of his authority. He dressed him in beautiful clothing and placed the royal gold chain around his neck. Pharaoh also gave Joseph the chariot of his second in command, and wherever he went, the command was shouted, kneel down. So Joseph was put in charge of all Egypt, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am the king, but no one will move a hand or a foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval. So then Pharaoh gave him a new name and a new wife and all that. That's not important at this point. Okay. Let's skip ahead. So now, what we have is they know that they're in the years of plenty. They know, because God has revealed it, that years of famine are coming. And so Joseph has said, let's implement a national program of collecting, a government program of collecting 20%, 1/5 of all the food that's produced. Now he says foods and grain. That all that's produced in Egypt, and store them up in the cities. Okay? So there will be food in the cities. So how did that go? Well, let's jump ahead here. Now we think, well, that's a pretty good lesson in preparedness, right? Hold on. You're about to hear the rest of the story, right? So the famine now we're in the famine. There was some in there that was talking about how Joseph's family came to Egypt. That's not important here. The famine became worse and worse. Okay. Remember, we've gone through the years of plenty. Years of famine are here, and it's getting bad. But at least he stored up all this food in the cities, right? You think everything's going to be fine? Listen up. The famine became worse and worse, and the crops continued to fail throughout Egypt and Canaan. Joseph collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan in exchange for grain, and he brought the money to Pharaoh's treasure house. Well, wait a minute. What did he say? What did that mean? Wait a minute. Joseph collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan in exchange for grain, and he brought the money to Pharaoh's treasure house. He collected. That's a nice word for took, right? Received. He took all the. Where'd the money come from? From the people, right? The people. The people who had been taxed 20% of their food and grains over the 7 years of plenty now were forced to buy that back. Do you understand this? They were forced to buy it back with their money. And how much money? Let me read it again. Joseph collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan in exchange for the grain. So now the people who had 20% of all their stuff taken from them to store up were now being forced to buy the grain back in order to stay alive, and all of their money. Now Pharaoh, the government, had all of the money in Egypt and Canaan. Okay? You're with me on this, right? Okay. When the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, they came to Joseph crying again for food. Our money is gone, they said, but give us bread. Why should we die? Well then, Joseph said. Remember, Joseph is held up as this great paragon of preparedness amongst most people who don't know the whole story, right? Okay. Well then, Joseph replied, since your money is gone, give me your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange. So they gave their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food. Soon all the horses, flocks, herds, and donkeys of Egypt were in Pharaoh's possession, but at least they were able to purchase food for that year. Okay, so now the people have no money and they have no livestock. What are they going to do? You may ask. Well, let's find out, shall we? And now we're in verse 18 of the 47th book of Genesis. The next year they came again and said, our money is gone and our livestock are yours. We have nothing left but our bodies and land. Why should we die before your very eyes? Buy us and our land. Buy us. All I have to sell is me. Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We will then become servants to Pharaoh. Well, they're not really servants, they're slaves. Okay, let's put that word in. We will then become slaves to Pharaoh. Just give us grain so that our lives may be saved, and so the land will not become empty and desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was so severe, and their land then belonged to Pharaoh, the government. Thus all the people of Egypt became servants, slaves to Pharaoh, slaves to the government. The only land he didn't buy was that belonging to the priests, for they were assigned food from Pharaoh and didn't need to sell their land. Interesting there, huh? Then Joseph said to the people, so now what are they going to do? Then Joseph said to the people, see, I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh, the government. I will provide you with seed so you can plant the fields. Then when you harvest it, a fifth of your crop will belong to Pharaoh. Keep 4/5 for yourselves and use it to plant the next year's crop and to feed yourselves, your households, and your little ones. Now, do you think that the people were mad about this? They had had 20% of all their food taken from them by the government. They had then had to pay to get some of that back just to keep from starving. All of their money, they had to give up all their money to keep from starving. Then, having no money, they had to give up all their livestock to keep from starving to the government. Okay, and then they had nothing else to sell, so they sold themselves into slavery to the government and all their land. So now Joseph says, well, okay, now from now on, you don't have anything, so I will give you some grain every year, and you're going to give 20% of the produce of that back to Pharaoh, the government, and then you can keep the rest to eat and plant. So they're essentially sharecroppers, right? You will own nothing. We'll get back to that. So do you think they were mad? Well, let's see what they said. "You have saved our lives," they exclaimed. "May it please you, sir, to let us be Pharaoh's servants," slaves. Joseph then made it a law throughout the land of Egypt, and it is still the law at the writing of Genesis, that Pharaoh should receive 1/5 of all the crops grown on his land, not the people's land. But since the Pharaoh had not taken over the priest's land, they were exempt from this payment. Now let me finish what I had said before. You will own nothing. "You have saved our lives, and may it please you, sir, to let us be Pharaoh's slaves, but you will be happy." Did you all know that complete story of Joseph? Many of you did. Some of you did of your own, and some of you did because I've read this to you before, and I've talked about it on the church channel. Is there a lesson there for us? Is there a lesson on the importance of being self-sufficient, self-reliant, of having groups of people who we can depend on, and following and under the direction and will of God, live our lives to be dependent only on Him and not the government? Yeah, I think that's the lesson. So that's this for this Sunday morning. Think about this. Think about this through the day. Share this with other people. Share this with other people. Share it with as many people as you can. Because while the lessons that are often used from the Bible about preparedness, Noah being one, which is a good lesson, and this story of Joseph being another, but in the opposite way, it gives us the lessons, doesn't it? Okay, all right. Share this. You all have a great Sunday. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow, but that means according to reliance and seeking the direction of God Himself. Because if we do it otherwise, we don't do it that well, right? Okay. You all have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.